The Weight of Betrayal. Chapter 1. The Perfect Beginning. Daniel had always been the steady, reliable one in his group of friends. He was the type of person everyone leaned on. His calm demeanor and quiet confidence made him a source of comfort for others. He had a steady job as a software developer, a modest apartment, and a circle of close friends he could count on for anything. But for a long time, the one thing missing in his life was someone to share it with. That all changed when he met Emily. It was a typical Friday evening when they first crossed paths. Daniel had been dragged out to a bar by his friend Mike, who insisted that they needed a break from their routine lives. Daniel wasn't much of a bar person, preferring quiet nights with a good book or a movie, but he reluctantly agreed. The bar was crowded, the music too loud, and the dim lights flickered in a way that annoyed him. He was about to suggest leaving when he noticed Emily. She was standing by the bar, laughing with a group of friends. Her laughter was genuine and infectious, her smile radiant in the dim light. Something about her drew him in, and before he realized what he was doing, he had walked over to introduce himself. "Hi, I'm Daniel," he said, trying to sound casual, though his heart was pounding in his chest. Emily turned to him, her green eyes sparkling as she gave him a warm smile. "Emily," she replied. "Nice to meet you, Daniel." They spent the rest of the evening talking, the noise of the bar fading into the background as they got to know each other. There was an instant connection between them, one that felt effortless and natural. Emily was funny, smart, and had a genuine kindness about her that made Daniel feel at ease. They exchanged numbers before the night ended, and from that moment on, their lives became intertwined. For the next 2 years, their relationship blossomed. Emily became a central part of Daniel's life, and everything seemed perfect. They went on weekend trips, spent holidays together with each other's families, and talked late into the night about their dreams and plans for the future. Daniel had never been happier. He was convinced that Emily was the one, the person he would spend the rest of his life with. Chapter 2. The First Signs. But as the 3rd year of their relationship approached, things began to change. It wasn't dramatic at first, just small, almost imperceptible shifts that, on their own, might not have meant anything. Emily seemed busier than usual, often claiming she had to stay late at work or meet with friends Daniel didn't know well. She started spending more time on her phone, sometimes smiling at messages that she would quickly dismiss when Daniel asked about them. At first, Daniel brushed it off. They were both adults with demanding jobs, and he trusted Emily completely. She had never given him any reason to doubt her, and the thought of her being unfaithful never crossed his mind. He told himself that everyone needed space sometimes, that it was normal for people to have friends and interests outside of the relationship. But as the weeks passed, the distance between them grew. Emily seemed more distant, more distracted, and less interested in the things they used to enjoy together. When Daniel suggested watching their favorite TV shows or going out for dinner, she often declined, saying she was too tired or had other plans. The intimacy they once shared began to fade as well. The long, heartfelt conversations they used to have became rare, replaced by short, polite exchanges that felt more like obligations than genuine connection. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but he didn't know how to bring it up without sounding paranoid. Chapter 3. The Warning. It wasn't until Mike, Daniel's best friend, mentioned something that his suspicions solidified into a gnawing fear. They were hanging out at a local coffee shop, catching up after a few weeks of not seeing each other. Mike seemed unusually quiet, his usual banter replaced with a more serious tone. "Hey, man, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about," Mike began, stirring his coffee nervously. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What's up?" Mike hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. I saw Emily the other night. She was at this bar downtown with some guy. They looked close. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by close? Mike sighed. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but they weren't acting like just friends. I didn't want to interfere, but I thought you should know. Daniel felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He didn't want to believe it, but Mike wasn't the type to exaggerate or make things up. He trusted Mike more than anyone, and the fact that he had even brought it up made Daniel feel sick. That night, Daniel lay awake in bed, his mind racing with doubts and questions. He tried to recall every recent interaction with Emily, searching for signs he might have missed. Was she really pulling away, or was it all in his head? He didn't want to confront her without proof, but the uncertainty was eating him alive. Chapter 4. The Discovery. Over the next few days, Daniel kept a closer eye on Emily, looking for anything that might confirm or deny his suspicions. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but the tension between them was becoming unbearable. Every time she picked up her phone or mentioned plans with friends, Daniel couldn't help but wonder if she was hiding something. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the table. Daniel glanced at it, intending to ignore it, but the name on the screen caught his eye. Tom. He didn't recognize the name, and curiosity got the better of him. He unlocked the phone, feeling guilty as he did, and opened the message. What he found shattered his world. The messages between Emily and Tom were filled with flirtatious exchanges, intimate conversations, and plans to meet up. It was clear that their relationship had crossed the line from friendship into something more. Daniel's hands shook as he read through the texts, each one a dagger to his heart. He felt sick, his mind reeling from the betrayal. When Emily emerged from the bathroom, Daniel was still sitting there, her phone in his hand. She froze when she saw the look on his face, her expression shifting from confusion to fear. Daniel, what are you doing? She asked, her voice trembling. Daniel stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. Who is Tom? His voice was steady, but the pain behind it was undeniable. Emily's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Don't lie to me, Emily, Daniel continued, his voice rising. I read the messages, I know. Emily sank onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Chapter 5. The Confession. Over the next hour, Emily confessed everything. She had met Tom through a mutual friend, and what had started as a harmless friendship had slowly evolved into something more. She hadn't meant for it to happen, but she couldn't deny that she had developed feelings for him. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I was confused. Things between us haven't been the same lately, and I didn't know how to fix it. Daniel felt numb. He had loved Emily with all his heart, trusted her completely, and now everything had come crashing down. The person he thought he knew, the person he had planned a future with, had betrayed him in the worst way possible. Was it just emotional? He asked, his voice hollow. Or did it go further? Emily hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. We kissed, but that's as far as it went. I swear, Daniel, I never wanted this to happen. But Daniel didn't know if he could believe her. The trust between them had been shattered, and no matter how much she apologized, he couldn't shake the image of her with someone else. Chapter 6. The Fallout. The days following Emily's confession were some of the darkest of Daniel's life. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw the messages, heard her apologies, and felt the weight of the betrayal all over again. He had never felt so alone, so completely broken. Emily tried to make amends, promising to cut all ties with Tom and begging for another chance. But Daniel didn't know if he could forgive her, or if he even wanted to. The pain was too deep, the wound too fresh. He had always believed that love could overcome anything, but now he wasn't so sure. He spent hours talking with Mike, who tried his best to support him, but admitted that he didn't know what Daniel should do. "Man, you've got to do what's right for you," Mike said one evening over beers. "If you think you can forgive her, then maybe you can work it out. But if you can't trust her anymore, then it's not worth it." Daniel knew Mike was right, but that didn't make the decision any easier. Chapter 7. Moving Forward. In the end, Daniel couldn't bring himself to stay. He loved Emily, but the betrayal had cut too deep. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't forget what she had done. And without trust, their relationship felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. The decision to end things wasn't easy. Daniel wrestled with it for days, alternating between anger, sorrow, and the occasional flicker of hope that maybe they could rebuild what was broken. But deep down, he knew that even if Emily was sincere in her apologies, their relationship would never be the same. Chapter 8. The Breakup. One rainy afternoon, Daniel asked Emily to meet him at the cafe where they had shared so many happy memories. The air was heavy with tension as they sat across from each other, the weight of their conversation hanging in the silence between them. Emily looked at him, her eyes swollen from crying. "Daniel, please. I love you. I know I made a mistake, but I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Can't we try? Can't we at least give it a chance?" Daniel's heart ached as he listened to her plead. He still loved her, that much was true. But the trust they had built was gone, and no amount of love could replace that. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I love you too, Emily," he said quietly. "But I don't think I can do this anymore. I thought we had something special, something unbreakable. But after what happened, I just don't know if we can ever go back to how things were." Emily's face crumpled, her body shaking with sobs. Daniel wanted to hold her, to comfort her the way he used to, but he knew it would only make things harder. "I'm so sorry," Emily whispered through her tears. "I never wanted to hurt you. I wish I could take it all back." "I know you didn't," Daniel replied softly, "and I forgive you. But that doesn't mean I can forget. We both deserve better than living in the shadow of this." They sat in silence for what felt like hours, both grieving the end of something that had once meant everything to them. Eventually, Daniel stood up, gave Emily one last, lingering look, and walked out of the cafe, leaving behind the life they had built together. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The weeks after the breakup were a blur of pain and numbness. Daniel threw himself into his work, trying to distract himself from the crushing loneliness that seemed to follow him everywhere. His apartment, once filled with memories of Emily, now felt cold and empty. Every corner held a reminder of her: the bookshelf they had built together, the mug she had bought him for his birthday, the scent of her perfume lingering faintly in the air. His friends tried to be there for him, but even their well-meaning words couldn't fill the void left by her absence. He spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering where it had all gone wrong and if he had made the right choice. He wanted to hate her, to feel anger, but all he felt was sadness, a deep, aching loss for the future they would never have. Slowly, though, Daniel began to heal. He started going out with friends more, reconnecting with hobbies he had neglected during his relationship with Emily. He took up running, something he had always meant to do but never found the time for, and found solace in the steady rhythm of his feet hitting the pavement. He even began journaling, pouring his thoughts and emotions onto the page, trying to make sense of everything he had been through. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. Months passed, and with time, the pain of the breakup began to fade. Daniel still thought of Emily often, but the memories no longer hurt as much. Instead, they became bittersweet, reminders of a chapter in his life that had taught him about love, trust, and, ultimately, betrayal. One evening, as he sat by the window of his apartment, watching the sunset, Daniel realized that he was no longer the same person he had been before. The betrayal had changed him, but it hadn't broken him. He had survived, and in doing so, he had learned a great deal about himself. He learned that he was stronger than he had ever thought, and that while love could be beautiful, it wasn't always enough to overcome everything. He had no regrets about the time he had spent with Emily. They had shared something real, something meaningful, even if it hadn't lasted. But now, it was time to move on. Chapter 11. Running into the Past. About a year after the breakup, Daniel was out for a run when he spotted Emily walking in the park, alone. She hadn't seen him yet, and for a moment, he considered turning around and leaving before she noticed him. But something made him stop. He stood there watching her for a moment. She looked the same, yet different. Maybe a little older, maybe a little wiser. He wondered if she had moved on, if she had found happiness again. Part of him wanted to ask, to catch up, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for that conversation. Just as he was about to turn away, Emily looked up and saw him. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, they both froze. "Daniel," she said softly, a mixture of surprise and something else, maybe sadness, maybe relief in her voice. "Emily," he replied, managing a small smile. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Emily spoke again. "How have you been?" "I've been good," Daniel said, and for the first time in a long time, he realized that it was true. "How about you?" Emily nodded. "I've been okay. Things have been different, but I'm doing better." Daniel could hear the sincerity in her voice, and for a moment he felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him. There had been a time when they had been each other's everything, but now they were just two people who had once loved each other, standing on the opposite sides of their shared past. "I'm glad to hear that," Daniel said, meaning it. They talked for a few more minutes, catching up on their lives, but there was no awkwardness or lingering bitterness between them. Instead, there was a sense of closure, of two people finally accepting that their paths had diverged and that it was okay. As they parted ways, Emily smiled at him one last time. "I'm really happy you're doing well, Daniel. You deserve it." "You too, Emily. Take care of yourself." Chapter 12. Moving on. Walking away from that encounter, Daniel felt lighter than he had in a long time. Seeing Emily again had reminded him of the love they had shared, but it also showed him how far he had come since then. He no longer felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on him. Instead, he felt hopeful, ready to face whatever the future held. He continued running through the park, the cool breeze brushing against his face, a smile slowly spreading across his lips. Life, he realized, was about change, about letting go of the past and embracing the possibilities of tomorrow. Emily had been a significant part of his story, but now it was time for him to write the next chapter on his own terms. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Daniel was excited about what was yet to come. Epilogue. New Horizons. A year later, Daniel stood at the edge of a new beginning. He had a new job, new friends, and was even starting to date again. The scars of his past hadn't disappeared, but they had healed enough for him to open his heart to new experiences. As he looked out over the horizon, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, Daniel smiled to himself. Life had thrown him one of its hardest lessons, but he had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more ready than ever to embrace whatever came next. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, He was at peace with that uncertainty. And that was enough. The weight of betrayal had been heavy, but now it was a burden he no longer carried.